The morning my grandson asked me for the password to my retirement account, I already knew he'd been stealing from it for 6 months. I gave it to him. I want you to understand what kind of woman would do that. Hand the key to the person robbing her and smile while she does it. You'd think she was a fool. You'd think she was exactly what they all decided she was. Soft, sentimental, slow, a little woman in a little house with a little dog, useful for holidays, and nothing else. That is what Daniel thought. He was wrong about almost everything, but he was right about one thing. I am sentimental. I was drinking from the mug when he asked me. A chipped blue ceramic mug, the glaze gone matte where my thumb has rubbed it for 22 years. He made it for me in the 3rd grade, the year his mother and father died on the interstate outside Lincoln, and he came to live with me. He pressed his small hand into the wet clay before they fired it, and you can still see the print there, under the rim, if you know to look for it. I know to look for it. I drink from that mug every single morning. And every single morning for the last 6 months I had been sitting at my kitchen table with that mug in one hand and my bank statements in the other, reading every line. Daniel did not know that part. He thought the statements went in a drawer unopened. He thought I couldn't read them anymore, or wouldn't, or that the numbers swam past an old woman's eyes, the way they swim past most people's. He forgot what I did for a living. For 31 years, before I ever baked him a birthday cake or signed a permission slip, I was a forensic accountant. My whole career was sitting across a table from someone who was very sure I'd never find it, and finding it. I found it in shell companies and offshore trusts and the books of men with lawyers who cost more than my house. Finding it in my own grandson took me about 4 minutes. So when he leaned in the kitchen doorway that morning, 26 years old, the same cowlick he's had since he was 9, and said, "Grandma, I think I should be able to help you manage your accounts. You shouldn't have to worry about all that." I did not tell him I'd been watching the money leave for half a year. I did not tell him I'd printed everything. I did not tell him I knew about the second account he'd opened in my name at a bank I've never set foot in. I told him thank you. I told him the password, and I watched the relief go across his face like sun through a window, because he thought he'd just gotten away with all of it. He hadn't. But to understand how a boy I raised from a grieving 8-year-old ended up forging my signature, and why I let him think he was winning, you have to go back to the spring, to the morning the first number didn't match. And I'm going to tell you all of it, including the part nobody saw coming, including what was waiting in the drawer he never opened. Stay with me. It matters how this ends. My name is Margaret Voss. I am 74 years old. I live outside Omaha, and I have a beagle named Counselor because he objects to everything. My husband Theodore has been gone 11 years. We never had children of our own. It didn't happen for us, and we made our peace with it, the long, slow way people did back then. And then my son, well, Theodore's son, from before me, David, and his wife Anne. They had Daniel. When Daniel was 8, there was a wreck on a wet highway, and in one afternoon, I went from a woman with a grandson she saw at Christmas to a woman with a grandson asleep in her spare room who woke up screaming for a mother who wasn't coming. I was 61. I had been planning to retire to a garden and a quiet. Instead, I learned to braid hair and check homework and sit outside a school counselor's office. I do not say this so you'll admire me. I say it so you understand that there is no version of this story where I did not love that boy completely. That's not the twist. The love is not in question. The love was never in question, not even on the worst day, which I'm getting to. Here is the wound, and it's a quiet one, the kind nobody films. It happens by degrees. Somewhere in the last few years, the people around me stopped asking me things. Daniel started finishing my sentences. He'd order for me at restaurants. He set up the television so I wouldn't have to fuss with it, which meant I could no longer use it. When I mentioned the market, he'd smile the way you smile at a child who said something sweet and incorrect. He didn't know. How could he? that I spent 3 decades testifying in federal court about money. He'd known me only as Grandma, and Grandma, in his mind, had gradually become someone the world happened to, someone to be managed. The dismissal didn't arrive as cruelty, it arrived as kindness. That's the part that takes the longest to see, and the part that does the most damage. By the time someone decides you can't handle your own life, they've usually decided it so gently that you'd feel ungrateful objecting. Now, before I take you into the spring, when the numbers started moving, let me say one quick thing, and then I'll leave you alone about it and get back to the story. If any part of what I'm describing is landing a little too close to home, the sentence finishing, the being managed, the soft, slow way your own family starts handling you, I put everything I learned, in 31 years of catching people who do this, into a plain language guide on protecting your money, your legal standing, and your dignity as you age. It's down in the description. It is not legal advice, and it won't replace a good attorney, but it's the map I wish every person my age had, before the first dollar ever went missing. That's all. It'll be there when you're ready. Now, the spring. It was a Tuesday, and I was at the table with the mug and a stack of statements, doing the thing I have done on the first of every month for 50 years. The thing nobody believed I still did. Reconciling, line by line, and there was a withdrawal. $400 from the money market account, dated the previous Thursday. I hadn't made it. And the first thought I had, the very first one, before fear, before anything, was not who. I already had a bad, sinking idea of who. My first thought was, be careful now, Margaret. Don't let him see your face change. There's a thing that happens to you. After enough years of the work I did, you stop reacting to the first number. The first number is never the story. The first number is a door, and if you fling it open and shout, the person on the other side simply stops, covers the rest, and you never see the shape of the whole thing. Amateurs confront, professionals collect. So I did not call Daniel. I did not call the bank in a panic. I poured a second cup into the blue mug. I let Counselor out into the yard, and I went and got every statement for the last 2 years, out of the drawer where Daniel was certain they sat unread. And I spread them across the dining table, the way I used to spread a subpoenaed ledger, and I started at the beginning, and I read. It's a particular feeling, finding the pattern in your own family's hand. I'd done it to strangers 1,000 times. The small test withdrawal first, they always start small, to see if anyone screams. $400. Then nothing for 2 weeks, watching. Then $600. Then the auto-pay for a credit card I'd never opened. $88 a month, the kind of number small enough to hide in plain sight. Then, in February, the big one, a transfer of $9,000 out of the money market and into an account ending in digits I didn't recognize. Routed, I'd later learn, through a second checking account someone had opened in my name, using my social security number at a bank 30 miles away. I want to tell you I was only angry. I wasn't. I sat there in the kitchen I'd raised him in, and I felt my chest go hollow, because the handwriting on the picture forming in front of me was a boy who used to fall asleep against my arm during thunderstorms. Anger would have been easier. Anger I could have spent in one phone call. What I felt was grief with the light still on. But grief, I have learned, is not an instruction. So I made a list, the way I always made a list. What did I actually have, and what did I only suspect? I had withdrawals I didn't authorize, provable. I had a recurring charge I could trace, provable. I had a suspicion about a second account, not yet provable, not by me, not legally, not without help. And I had one enormous thing the bank's computers didn't. I had context. I knew this boy's life. I knew he'd lost the warehouse job in October and told me he was between things, doing some online stuff. I knew there was a girl, Brianna, and that she had expensive opinions about the wedding they hadn't told me was being planned. I knew shame when I heard it in a young man's voice, because I'd heard it in 100 grown men's voices on the witness stand. That was the moment I understood I was not looking at a thief. I was looking at a drowning person who had decided, somewhere in the dark, that the old woman's money was a life raft she wasn't using anyway. That understanding did not excuse 1 cent of it, but it changed the question. The question was no longer, how do I catch him? I'd already caught him. The question was, what do I want to be true a year from now? And there were versions of that year with my grandson in a courtroom, and versions with him in a prison, and I had to decide, with my own hands, which year I was building. So here's what I did first, and it's the same thing I'd have told any client to do, and almost none of them had the stomach for it. Nothing. I changed not 1 password. I moved not $1. For 3 more weeks, I let the theft continue exactly as it was. Because a theft in motion leaves a trail, and a thief who feels safe gets sloppy. And I needed him to keep writing the story down for me. Every morning, the mug. Every morning, the statements. And every evening, Daniel calling to check on me, sweet as anything, asking if I needed help with my accounts. No, sweetheart, I'd say. You know I don't understand all that. I'm just glad you're keeping an eye on it for me. And I'd hear him relax, 3 counties away, and I'd write down the date. I need you to meet the version of Daniel that I met, before you decide what he deserved. Because the boy who forged my name is also the boy I'm about to describe, and both of them are real, and that's the whole trouble with people. 3 weeks into my collecting, he came over on a Sunday like he always did, and he fixed the gutter that didn't need fixing, and he sat at my table and ate 2 helpings of a pot roast, and when Counselor put his ridiculous head on Daniel's knee, Daniel fed him roast under the table thinking I couldn't see. I've always been able to see, and at one point he went quiet, and he turned that blue mug around on the table. He'd picked it up to look at it, the way he sometimes did, and he said, "I can't believe you still use this thing." And I said, "It's my favorite thing I own." And something moved across his face that I'd put money was shame, and he set the mug down very carefully, like it had gotten heavy. That night, after he left, I did the thing I'd been putting off. I went looking for the why, not to forgive it. I want to be clear, I have never once confused understanding a thing with forgiving it. My career was built on that exact distinction. I went looking because in my experience, the why is load-bearing. The why tells you whether you're dealing with a predator or a person, and you do not treat those two the same, not if you're wise. It didn't take long. He'd been careless online, the way that generation is, and a man who'd lost a warehouse job doesn't hide his life well. There were the markers of a young person going under, the payday loan landing pages in a shared browser history he'd used on my den computer and never cleared, the gambling app, the desperate little flurries of activity at 2 a.m, the wedding deposit he couldn't make. Brianna's family, who I gathered had made him feel, at every turn, like a man who showed up empty-handed. He had dug himself a hole with a teaspoon, in the dark, alone, too ashamed to tell the one person who had never once turned him away. And then he'd looked across the county at an old woman with a retirement account and a paid-off house, and he had told himself a story. The story was, she'd give it to me anyway. It's coming to me eventually. She doesn't even use it. I'm not really stealing, I'm just early. I know that story cold. I have heard it from embezzlers in good suits. It is the most common story in the world, and it is always told by someone who has stopped being able to look the person in the eye. And here is the open loop I'll leave you on for a moment, because it's the thing that nearly broke my resolve. When I finally pulled the full picture together, every withdrawal, every forged authorization, the second account, the whole architecture of it, I found something I wasn't looking for. A folder on that same den computer, photographs, scanned documents. He'd been backing up my important papers, my insurance, the deed, Theodore's death certificate, the photos of his own parents, organizing them, protecting them, in the middle of robbing me, the same hands doing both. A part of him was looting the house, and another part of him was trying to make sure nothing precious got lost in the fire he was setting. I sat with that for a long time, counselor at my feet, the mug gone cold, because that folder told me the truth I'd half known since the first $400. There was still a person in there, and if there was still a person in there, then what I did next could not just be about the money. It had to be about reaching the person before the thief finished eating him. I just had to be smart enough to do both at once. And that, the how of doing both at once, is where the 31 years finally came out of the drawer. Around the 16-minute mark of any real reckoning, there's a turn, and here's mine. I stopped being his grandmother for about a week, and I became, one more time, the woman they used to fly in when the numbers had teeth. The first thing a forensic accountant learns is that you do not need to prove what you know. You need to document what you know, in a form a third party cannot wave away. My word that money was missing is a sad old woman's word. A reconciliation, dated, sourced, cross-referenced to bank records, with every unauthorized transaction flagged and totaled. That is evidence. So that's what I built. I sat at that table for 4 days, and I reconstructed every dollar. And I built the kind of file I used to hand to federal prosecutors. Spiral-bound, tabbed. A cover page with a total at the bottom that I'm not going to say out loud, except that it had 5 figures in it. But the file was only the flaw. The file is what you make when your goal is punishment. My goal was more complicated than punishment, and that required the second thing the work taught me, which almost nobody understands about my profession. The leverage isn't the evidence. The leverage is the choice you give them about the evidence. So I made a phone call I'd been preparing for 30 years to know how to make. There's a woman named Lena Okafor in the fraud division at my actual bank. Not the phantom one, my real one. And when I called the general line and started speaking in the specific language of unauthorized ACH transfers and signature verification and identity-based account opening, I got escalated to someone like Lena in about 90 seconds. Because when you talk like someone who knows exactly what was done to them, the whole tone of the call changes. They stop hearing a victim. They start hearing a colleague who got robbed. Lena confirmed the second account in 2 days, the one opened in my name at the bank 30 miles off. That was the piece I couldn't get alone, and it was the piece that mattered most, because opening an account in someone else's name with their social security number is not a family squabble. It's identity theft, and it's a federal crime, and it does not care that you used to fall asleep against the victim's arm in thunderstorms. The moment Lena confirmed it, Daniel's whole future was, quite literally, in my hands. One signed complaint and the machine would start, and it would not stop because I cried, and it would not stop because he was sorry. I had the file, I had the federal hook, I had the leverage. And I want to tell you that the night before I confronted him, I was calm. I wasn't. I stood in my kitchen at 1 a.m. holding that ridiculous blue mug, the little handprint under the rim catching the light over the stove, and I thought about a boy who screamed for his mother in my spare room, and I nearly burned the whole file in the sink and told myself I'd handle it with love and a long talk. That's the trap, by the way. That's the exact trap that empties old people's accounts to the last dollar. Not stupidity, love. The unwillingness to be the one who makes the unbearable thing real. I have watched love sign away houses. I have watched love decline to press charges 40 times in a row while the same hand kept taking. Love, unaccompanied by spine, is just a slower way of being robbed. So I didn't burn it. I did something harder. I built him a door. I took everything, the file, the federal complaint Lena had ready to go, the proof, and I put it all in a folder. And next to that folder, I drew up a second document, a repayment agreement and a confession, plain and legal, that said, I, Daniel, took the following sums by the following means. I acknowledge it in writing, and I agree to the following terms. One folder was prison. One folder was a long, hard road back, and I decided that I would lay both on the kitchen table, and I would tell him the truth, all of it, that I'd known since spring, that I'd watched, that I'd documented, that I could end him with a signature, and then I would let him choose which folder he picked up. Because a person who is handed mercy he didn't earn never changes. But a person who is shown the cliff, and then shown a rope, and made to grab the rope with his own hand, that person sometimes comes back. I had one chance to find out which one my grandson was. I asked him to come for Sunday dinner. I made the pot roast. I set the table for two, and I set the blue mug at my place. And I put the two folders on the chair beside me where he couldn't see them until I wanted him to. He ate. He fed Counselor under the table. He asked, one more time, sweet as ever, whether I wanted him to take a look at my accounts. And I set down my fork, and I said, Daniel, I need you to listen to me, and I need you not to talk until I'm finished. I told him I'd known since April. I watched the color leave his face, the way it leaves a man's face, when the floor he was standing on turns out to be water. I told him the $400, the $88 a month, the $9,000 in February. I told him the name of the bank 30 miles away, and I watched him understand that I knew about the account he was most certain no one could ever connect to him. I did not raise my voice, not once. I have found that the quietest voice in the room is the one everyone leans in to hear. He started to cry before I was halfway through, and he started to say the words. I was going to put it back, Grandma. I swear, I was going to, and I held up one hand, and I said the only cruel thing I said that whole night, because it was also the truest. I said, I know you believe that. The men I sent to prison believed it too. Then I put the folders on the table. I told him what each one was. I told him the first one was already prepared, that Lena at the bank was waiting on my word, that what he'd done to my identity was federal, and that I was not exaggerating to frighten him. I was the one person in his life qualified to tell him exactly how bad it was, and it was that bad. And then I slid the second folder an inch toward him, and I said, or you sign this one. You pay back every dollar on a schedule I'll hold you to, because I will be reading the statements, Daniel. I have always been reading the statements. You go to the counseling for the gambling. You tell Brianna the truth about your money before you marry her, not after. And you never, ever lie to me again. Those are the terms. Pick up a folder. He sat there a long time. Counselor whined. The roast went cold. And then my grandson reached out with a shaking hand, and he picked up the second folder, and he wept like the 8-year-old in the spare room. And I came around the table and I held him, the thief and the boy, both of them at once, because by then I'd made my peace that they were the same person, and I was going to have to love and discipline the same person at the same time for as long as it took. That was 2 years ago. He's paid back 19 of it. He's got a real job and a sponsor, and a wife who knows everything, because he told her, and married her anyway, and she married him anyway, which tells you something about both of them. He calls me every Sunday, and he does not ask, anymore, if I need help managing my accounts. He knows better. The mug sits where it always sits. He made me a new one last Christmas, on a wheel, in a class he took, a grown man's mug, heavy and good. It's lovely. I keep it on the shelf. I still drink from the chipped blue one, every morning, with the statements, because the handprint under the rim is the boy, and the chip is the truth, and I have learned to hold both in the same hand, without dropping either. So that's the answer to the thing I promised you at the start, why I handed the robber the key and smiled. I wasn't surrendering. I was giving him enough rope to either hang himself or climb out, and I was the only person alive who loved him enough to hold the other end while he decided. If you've sat where I sat, if the people who are supposed to love you have quietly decided you're past noticing, I'll tell you what I told him without saying it out loud that night. Being underestimated is not a weakness. Handled right, it is the best position you will ever negotiate from, but you have to do the unglamorous thing first. You have to read the statements. You have to keep the records. You have to know, cold, where your money and your name and your legal standing actually stand. before the first dollar ever moves. That's why I wrote the guide in the description. 31 years of catching people turned into the plain, practical armor I wish someone had handed me before any of this. It's not legal advice. See a good attorney in your own state, always. But it is the map. Take it. Read your statements tomorrow morning. And keep the mug.